We're back with Jay Warner Wallace in more biblical defense of a genocide. We're going to jump right into this video.
Okay, so you say that Bible condones genocide. All right.
Oh, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and join the Discord.
Genocide, I think we would agree, is the utter and complete destruction of an entire
Absolutely not. That is not the definition of genocide. Nowhere has that definition of genocide except for Christian apologists, because they can then say, well, they didn't absolutely and completely destroy them because they're still around. No, genocide is, you know what? We'll just make it simple. You can look up the definition of genocide. There's many definitions that will work just fine. But the one that I like to go with is the attempt to eradicate a people through whatever means. It doesn't mean that you succeeded. It just means that you attempted. But let's continue. Let's
ethnic people group. But the God of the Bible never commanded such a thing.
It doesn't have to be an ethnic people
I know why you might
either.
think that, but the language of the Bible is confusing, and it might have confused you. The ancient Bible authors are just that. They're ancient. So they use ancient Near Eastern expressions that sound like utter destruction when in fact they don't actually mean that.
No, God could not have been more clear when he said to kill all of the people. It wasn't metaphor. It wasn't what I can't remember the defense that I've heard Frank Turek use. Like, oh, when you say, oh, okay, no, he's going to go into it. He's going to go into it. Let's.
For example, Joshua, and if you look at this in Joshua chapter 10, verse 40, it says in the Bible that Joshua utterly destroyed all who breathed in Canaan. Yet later in the same Old Testament book now, right, the book of Joshua, we find that the Canaanites are still in the land. They still remain in the land.
Because they failed. They failed. That's all.
Land. Now, how can that be? Is the Bible lying? Is he just so stupid in the ancient world that they can't figure out that if I tell you I destroyed everything, I can't later on expose that I didn't by showing those people are still there? No, I don't think that's the case at all.
Okay, so real quick. I'm just going to grant this argument. Fine. They didn't succeed. They still attempted to kill all of the people. What does this matter? This is such a bad argument.
Expressions that are used, and this is based on some of the work that Paul has done, are similar to modern expressions that we use all the time, modern metaphors. Like last night, if you watch the game, you might say, oh, the Lakers killed the Pistons.
You don't see just a little bit of a difference when you are a god and you're commanding your people to kill all of the people in the land. And the Lakers game, when you said, hey, we're going to kill the Pistons, one is dealing with basketball, and you're referring to the amount of points that you're going to score over the opposing team. And the other one is war, where you're going to kill more people than the opposing army has killed. But to be very clear, it wasn't army against army. It was army against a people group. So yes, when you say, hey, we're going to go kill that people group, you probably mean something like you're going to eradicate the people group. There's such a clear difference here. This is such a terrible, terrible apologetic.
Well, I can say the next day, well, that's not true. I saw the Pistons getting on the plane to go home afterwards. They weren't killed.
Because they're talking about a basketball game, Warner Wallace.
They literally killed the Pistons. I mean that they destroyed them. Well, I don't mean they destroyed them. I mean that they beat them badly. Well, I don't mean they beat them. I mean that they won the game by a large margin. Okay, so you see, I'll have to.
So how do you win a war by a large margin? But again, it's not a war. How do you win a destruction of a people group by a large margin? Some might call that genocide. I don't know.
Kind of get my language more and more specific in order to avoid using metaphors. So in many cases, the commands to utterly destroy that you see in the Old Testament regarding any people group are more akin to saying to render this group completely unable to harm or influence you. Now you can do that.
Thank you so much, Jay Warner Wallace. You have just described genocide. Render them unable to harm or influence you. That's a genocide, Jay Warner Wallace. Thank you for saying that God condones genocide, because that's what it is.
without having to destroy every last member of that group. So can you see how we're
yes, that's genocide. J. Warner Wallace. That is a genocide. That's genocide.
word usage might actually
Saying
lead
loud,
you to a false
the
conclusion.
quiet part out loud there, buddy.
Now, I'm offering this because, again, when we respond to some objections that are offered against Christianity, we have a tendency to want to look for a silver bullet. This idea that, hey,
slavery and genocide is the silver bullet against Christianity. It is. It really, really is. Now you have people like J. Warner Wallace and Frank Turek and whoever else who try to put up the shield in defense of slavery and genocide. The crusaders, the noble crusaders of slavery and genocide. But it's the silver bullet.
if someone says this, you just say this one thing, and you're good to go. If someone makes this kind of objection, you just come back with this one sentence. This is the silver bullet sentence. You just say this and you're done. That is never the case for any criminal trial I have ever worked. I have never been able to walk in front of a jury and say, I got this guy. I think he's the killer. And I'm now going to give you the one piece of evidence that demonstrates he's the killer. No, all of my
He commanded a genocide.
cases, like all cases in America, are cumulative. It's on the basis of several pieces of evidence that I can make the proper inference related to this potential suspect's involvement. Here is something similar. I don't think that either one of the responses I've given you can sit by itself and be sufficient. I don't think it is. It's never the case. Any description of why anyone does anything, any description of defending any claim, it's always built on several pieces of cumulative evidence that help to.
So if you notice, I did skip this was number 2, the number 2 quick shot response. The number 1 I will cover in a different video. In the first like 20 minutes of this video is just him shilling for himself, or 10 minutes. Yeah, the first roughly 10 minutes of the video is just him saying how great he is. But the first response essentially sums up like this: is, well, God did command the genocide, but they deserved it. And the second one was, well, God didn't command a genocide. The two apologetics that he gives in defense of God's genocide refute each other. But we'll go over the first one next.
Explain it in totality. And if someone's got a problem with that because they feel like, well, you're just being, you're just using this little rhetorical device, they just haven't really thought much about the nature of criminal trials or any claim that's defended.
You have not thought a lot about the nature of criminal trials, J. Warner Wallace.
At any level, in any discipline. Most of the time, we don't even make inferences about science until we have several pieces of scientific evidence, hopefully from different kinds of disciplines, that all point to the same reasonable inference. Then we can have great confidence that this is a good inference. Same thing happens here. I think we have to do two things when responding to this idea that God condones, or the Bible condones, genocide. Number one, it all comes down to definitions. What do we mean by genocide? Number two, what do we mean that when we talk about the language used in the Bible about entirely destroying a people group? Number three, what do we think about the nature of sin? And do we ever think that a God who's holy would be just enough to stop sin? And look, there are some things that most of us would say, hey.
I will say this in response to the first video. You know what? Now we'll do that. We'll do that.
Your life should be taken from you if you, in fact, do something like X, whatever X is. Now, we might not agree that you deserve the death penalty, but we would say your life needs to be taken from you. We're going to put you in jail for the rest of your life. Okay. You're still taking someone's life from them. We believe there are some crimes for which the punishment ought to be that the person committing the crime should have their life taken from them. Now, we happen to have a system.
Except that even if the Canaanites were doing this terrible, horrible, awful thing, which was killing children, essentially, is what J. Warner Wallace and many others claim, God commanded all of the children to be killed as well. So I will say, I will grant it, an effective way to stop children from being killed in the future is to kill all the children. It is yeah,
system in place in which we have prisons. So when someone does something that egregious, even if you said, I don't believe in the death penalty, well, you can then have the option of life in prison without the possibility of parole. We call that an LWOP. You could do that given the system we have in place. There were no penitentiary systems in the ancient Near East. So to take someone's life from them
slaves
for having done something that's so egregious that it's worthy of having your life taken from you, and you have less options in the ancient Near East. So in one of the responses, the first one, we're really talking about the nature of sin and what is due certain types of actions child murders. And in the second option, we're talking about what is the language that God was really using anyway? What did he mean by that? Then we know he meant something other than utter total destruction, unless Joshua, the writer of whoever was writing Joshua, if you don't even believe that I happen to, but if you don't believe that Joshua wrote Joshua, the Old Testament author has got to be an idiot.
Oh my God, what is
if
he
he's gonna say that
talking
God
about? This
commanded
is
this,
so
and Joshua said he
boring.
did it, but he didn't really do it. No, he did what God commanded. We just have to rethink what it is we think God commanded by looking at the use of language. The same way
So he did the genocide. It just wasn't really a genocide. God was just kidding.
he would say, hey, I don't think when I tell you that the Lakers killed the Pistons last night, that they actually murdered the entire team. Now,
It's more like metaphor, something like,
and when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you, and you have defeated them, then you must destroy them totally. Make no treaty with them, and show them no mercy. Moreover, the Lord your God will send a hornet among them until even the survivors who hide from you have perished. Now kill all the boys, and kill every woman who has slept with a man. But save for yourself every girl who has never slept with a man. In Minecraft.
that being said, I hope that these two answers will help you begin conversations. And again, it's going to require you to know more. You don't know a lot more, because I don't need you to be a mile ahead of me in order to lead me to truth. As a matter of fact, if you were a mile ahead of me on a path, if you make a right-hand turn, I won't even see you make
oh
it
my
because you're far
God,
ahead of me.
what is
I
he
just need you to be
talking
a couple
about?
of
This
steps
is so
ahead of me.
bad.
That means that we're going to have to be a couple of steps ahead of our friends and family members if we want to lead them to truth. Let's start to get a couple of steps ahead of them. Hope that helps, and I'll see you back here next week.
Lead you to truth that God did, in fact, command the genocide. He agrees. He described the genocide. He could have used any definition of genocide that he wanted to, and he chose a pretty good definition of genocide and said, yes, this is the thing that God did. Oh, religion rots your brain.